The St. Paul Nation is a community of believers that exercises its civil responsibility by voting. In preparation of our June 22nd primary day, please join us as we meet the candidates.
Well, good morning, St. Paul Nation. This is Meet the Candidates, and today we have a candidate with us by the name of Kathryn Garcia, and she is running for mayor of New York City. Now, as you know, St. Paul Community Baptist Church, East Brooklyn congregations, and Metro IAF, we're nonpartisan. We don't endorse, but we want to be informed when we go to the polls. So I am delighted today to have Kathryn Garcia with us. I'd like to know a little bit more about you, and I'm sure members of our congregation and the St. Paul Nation would like to know who you are. Who is Kathryn Garcia?
Pastor, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to the St. Paul's Nation for listening and for being informed, because this is a critical moment in our city's history. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn in a multiracial family because I was adopted, as were two of my siblings who were black, and then they had two more. And they were able to raise all five of us on civil servant salaries. One was a teacher, one was a labor negotiator. So it was 1970s Brooklyn. Little stickball, little skelly, little kick the can, and a lot of conversation at the dinner table about what were you going to do with your life? How were you going to serve? That you needed to have a mission in your life. And that's where I got my work ethic from, about service to the public. And that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years, delivering New York City's water supply, plowing snow, picking up garbage, getting up early, getting the job done for each and every New Yorker every day.
Wow. So we sent you a copy of our vision statement and the ways in which we think New York City needs to move forward. And in that vision statement, we spent a lot of time talking about housing in New York City. And our vision for housing is to repair public housing from top to bottom. We know that the federal government is talking about an $40 billion investment, and Senator Chuck Schumer is trying to push that number to $80 billion. We know it's going to take about $40 billion for New York City in order to repair public housing. If, in fact, you are to become the mayor of New York City, and the federal government infuses that kind of capital into the system for the repair of NYCHA, how would you organize and work to hold public officials accountable, NYCHA officials accountable, to make sure that this really happens?
This is really the critical question, because we, all of us, and I'm going to say all of us, have allowed NYCHA to fall apart. To make it so that people do not have homes that are habitable, and that in many ways are dangerous to their health. And it is such an asset. We have to make the investment, because you should have heat and hot water. You should have bathrooms that are new. But holding people accountable is what I do. You know my work. I have been on the front lines, making sure that we were taking care of New Yorkers, and that I hold everyone that's ever worked for me accountable for delivering. Whether or not that was during COVID, delivering 1 million meals a day to people who were sick or who were homebound, accountability matters. And we have to have that amount of money be well used and make a real difference for people who live in public housing.
So, one of the ways in which we thought about public housing and accountability is the same way you have the School Construction Authority. There are experts that make sure that New York City constructs school buildings in the most economic and efficient way. We're thinking that perhaps we need that kind of infrastructure for public housing. What do you think?
No, I agree. And there actually is legislation at the state level to create an authority very similar to the School Construction Authority, so that we're getting value, and we're getting long-term value, but really making people's lives different. And I am a true believer in the power of housing to heal. When you have somewhere to lay your head, you're going to do better in school. You're going to do better in your career. and your stress level is going to be better. Housing heals. It is the right investment to make, not only in public housing, but more broadly in affordable housing.
Let's talk about affordable housing. So East Brooklyn congregations, we're known for the Nehemiah plan, 5,000 plus homes, if you include apartments, around 6,000. And not only have we constructed homes, we've regenerated this community. It is our belief that this ought to be replicated throughout New York City. There are city-owned properties, land that we think should be used. We think that there are opportunities for the next mayor to increase equity in Black and brown communities. We think that the next mayor should think long and hard about affordable housing. What do you think?
And I want to thank you for all the work that you and the congregations have done over the years. It's transformed East New York, absolutely transformed it, and gave people an opportunity to start creating wealth, to have something to pass on to their children and their grandchildren. I do believe that we have to come together with community and work with you about how are we going to fund things like Nehemiah Housing. But in the affordability program that I have proposed, 50,000 units of deeply affordable housing that you're making under $30,000 a year for a family of three. We need people to be able to live here and to be able to work here, but we also have to do all the other things. It's not just the housing, but it's where are the schools? Are you close to transportation? How are we making it so you're close to a park so that you can have a full community experience and really grow up healthy? Much more of a livable city for everyone.
Okay, so you make interviewing really easy because you just led into the next subject. So here's what I want to talk about now. Education. And now we've got a new reality based on the pandemic that we're coming out of, and we're talking about recovery. But let's talk about education and also broadband access. One of the things that has become very clear in our community is that there's an inequity when it comes down to technology. There's a technology gap in our community. I want you to talk about that. And what would a Garcia mayoralship look like? What would it look like under your administration to close that gap?
We all learned during COVID that broadband is not a nice to have. It is a must have, whether or not it's for education or for work or for telehealth. We can hold the franchisees, the Verizons, the Comcasts, accountable for pulling the fiber to get it to your home and then making sure there is low cost or free broadband. That actually is in the regulations. But I am also excited about the possibility of even jumping fiber and getting to 5G, to have broadband speeds based off a cell tower, easier to get in place. But as New York City government, we need to make sure every child still has a device. They've got to be in school full time. They've got to be in school, really critical for us to recover. But they still are going to need to be connected. That's the future. The future is about technology. And we need real opportunity. And that's why in my administration, economic development and workforce development has to be combined. We shouldn't be making investments that don't create jobs for the people that live here.
You mentioned that just a few moments ago before we came on the air. You talked about being creative and thinking about the future in terms of technology. I would imagine that would deal with green technology and other opportunities. Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, climate change is here. Last year, literally California burned and Texas froze. We have to protect ourselves, but this is also an opportunity for new jobs, for a new skill set. If we start now with training people for when offshore wind is coming, that we train people because we need to put a green roof on every single school in the city of New York, not only because it creates more green space and an outdoor classroom, but absorbs stormwater, cools our environment, and reduces our energy use by 25%. It's a win-win. Having a more livable city, having more trees. I was actually out in Queens recently on one of our very hot days, and I was like, this is the first street. We're getting trees all right down here. It will make the air cooler, it will make the air cleaner, and it will protect our environment in the future. But it is a real opportunity for us to be training people for these new careers. But it's also, we have to be making investments in our children. They've had a terrible, terrible year. And that means art and culture and music in every single one of our public schools. And also, as we have recently discussed, I've supported raising the charter cap because my focus is on what is best for our children today. I want to make public school palaces, but until we get there, I want everybody have their hands in the water pushing us forward so that every kid is ready for the 21st century economy.
Last question. I want to ask you this on behalf of Metro IF and East Brooklyn congregations. If you should emerge from this primary as the Democratic nominee, would you be willing to meet with us? We can't wait till January to start thinking about.
No, we can't.
Would you be willing to meet with us?
I will be out here as soon as they actually tabulate the votes, which apparently is going to take a while.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Let's hope not, but they might use baskets. I don't know. I will absolutely be out here because I want to walk in day one with, we are going to bust open the doors and get things moving because our families need it, and they needed it yesterday. I need to do free childcare for people who make under $70,000. I need affordable housing. I need senior housing. I need to see all of these things come together so that New Yorkers do better and that we all thrive here.
Kathryn, you've got one more opportunity to speak directly to the St. Paul Nation, Metro IF. That camera right there, that's your camera. Tell everybody why you should be the next mayor of New York City.
I want to thank everyone who listened this Sunday morning. I am very appreciative to be here. And I'm running for mayor because I don't want the title of mayor. I want to do the job. And I intend to keep every promise that I make, because I don't just make a plan, I deliver on a plan, and we've got to deliver bigger than ever before. I have been the city's go-to crisis manager, whether or not that was during Hurricane Sandy or during COVID, delivering over 1 million meals a day. I'm ready on day one to make this a safer, healthier, more livable city. Thank you.
Well, Kathryn, best of luck to you. And if you emerge, we look forward to having that meeting and that relationship and that partnership to move our city forward. To the St. Paul Nation, I can't tell you who to vote for, but as your pastor, I'm going to tell you, make sure you vote. So let's get out to the polls. Make sure you get there on the 22nd. And whatever you do, vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Blessings.